that's one thing about goals, guys, is like you cannot, if you're setting yourself mediocre goals that kind of like really don't matter and things that you could probably just do, there's that's the reason why you give up on them, because they don't matter enough, right? So the goal has to be big enough and have enough why that you're going to actually attack it.
Welcome back to another episode of Keeping It Real Estate. I'm your co-host, Mike Roeder, and today we have Brady McDonald joining us on the show. Brady is the CEO of Barefoot & Co. and an award-winning real estate investment and development firm. And Brady is also fresh off of not only participating in, but completing an Ultraman marathon. So super excited to get into that. But Brady, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Michael. I'm excited to be here and chat with you.
Most definitely. So, just to start off, Brady, I want to congratulate you on finishing the Ultraman marathon. I mean, what an accomplishment. And to our listeners out there that aren't familiar with that, an Ultraman consists of a 6.2 mile swim followed by a 260 mile bike ride and a 52.4 mile run. So a double marathon. So I'd love for you to start out with not only talking about the Ultraman and the Ironmans that you've done, but also a little bit about your background as well.
Yeah, sure. So I started, actually, I'm Canadian. I'll start there. So I grew up in a small town in Canada, in Ontario, near Toronto, about an hour north of Toronto. And, didn't really, grew up with no money, really. Like I started Brady's Lawn Care and snow removal at age 11 out of the necessity to pay for my goalie equipment, right? And pay for the hockey tuition. And, that gave me the entrepreneurial bug. At 16, I lost my license for drinking and driving. And at that point, my parents, we went through a really nasty divorce when we were like 11. And so, by the time I was 16, my parents, I was living with my mom and they said, like, you need to go to school, grow up. And so when I left home, I thought, hey, I'm going to make $50,000 a year, because if I make that, that's what happiness is, right? That was my perspective. Well, little did I know there was actually more opportunity out there. And I met a guy who was actually one of my friend's brother's buddies. And he worked for this company called Hydro One Power Company. And he had a brand new truck and a full case of beer and making six figures. He's a young guy. At this point, I was 18 years old. And I thought, if he could do it, I could do it. Right. And so I went to school for forestry, became an arborist. I was going to school to be an arborist, a tree guy. And in between first year, second year, got that job, right? And, that was, kind of really where the 0 to 100 mindset or mentality was like proven, because I just was relentless on sending my resume and faxing it at the time to this company. And eventually it landed in the right hands with the right person and I got the job. And I was a utility arborist instructor by trade for 14 years. So I climbed trees, roped trees around the hydro lines, and then I ended up running a training center. That was my background. So adult education essentially was training, and it was my background in trees. So we were teaching people how not to kill themselves around the hydro lines. Got into real estate in 2015 because we were just looking for freedom. We were looking for more. We knew that the company had we had limited time freedom, limited income, and a limited professional development. And so what else can we do, right? So we started looking at buying storage facilities and, network marketing and all these different things. And eventually met a guy who was a full-time real estate investor. And again, it was the same thing. It's like, hey, if he could do it, I can do it. And so, we read a book. We realized, we figured out the strategy. And we learned we could buy a single family home, convert it to a legal duplex, refinance it, and rent it out. That would be the strategy. And we proved it once. We did all the renovations ourselves. And that was when it was born, 2015. And we've done hundreds of deals since. And the deals obviously got much bigger. But that's kind of the Cole's notes of like my background into real estate, essentially. I could probably pause there for a minute if you want before we go into Ultraman.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And I love that you started, your own business at age 11. There's not a lot of 11-year-olds out there that are starting businesses. And what motivated you at that point in your life, other than money? Was it someone else that, gave you the itch or planted it in your mind, or was it just at your core?
Well, it was just like I had a problem. And the problem was I wasn't going to be able to go and play hockey if I couldn't pay for it myself. And so it was purely a necessity. And so that's ultimately what it was. And so I'm like, hey, what can I do to make money? And my mom actually worked for this dental clinic around the corner from our house. So I'd wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and I'd shovel all the snow and write little receipts, right? And submit invoices and get them back. And just good experience, because like those are the basics of business, of entrepreneurship, right? And then I eventually got another client right across the street, because I went and knocked on his door, and he had a gas station. So I filled his pop machines and watered his flowers and cleaned his shop, right? And it just, once you understand how to get money, it's no different. We're just adults now, right? And hopefully the zeros are bigger. Back then, I think the minimum wage is like $6.40, right? I think having that type of experience as a young kid really does. You start to see businesses and how money can be made, or how you can be creative to create the life you want, because it's yours for a taking. You're not waiting for somebody to give you a job or give you hours or, give you things. You're just going to go get it.
I couldn't agree more. Another thing, while we're talking about children, when we were out in Costa Rica, you were telling me a little bit about teaching your daughter how to surf. And I think she's somewhere in between the ages of 10 and 12, and how some of the waves were just pummeling her, and she was getting up and trying it again and again and again. And I think, you can really teach your kids a lot and build some of that grit. And we'll get into that more as we talk about the Ultraman. But you can build some of that grit when you're young at age. Is that what you're trying to do with your two daughters?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the girls, so they're 9 and 3 right now, and they've almost 10, the older one, and like they've traveled everywhere with us, right? They're homeschooled, like the young one is cutting on the countertop with a knife. We do not baby them, obviously we don't want them to get hurt, but we let them have their bumps and bruises, and because that ultimately is what creates grit, and to realize that you can overcome adversity, right? Like when you get punched or you fall down, it hurts. You realize, I could do that again, right? Or maybe I'll do this to prevent that, right? And try it again next time. And sooner we get, punched, in real life, the better ultimately, right? Like, and I'm saying figuratively punched, like, I'm even just like, have to go through hardship. There's all kinds of hardship that we go through in life unintentionally and unwanted, right? And so there's no better way to prepare yourself for those times than to put yourself through hardship intentionally, because it builds that grit. It builds that ability to endure, whether you want it or not, right? And so, yeah, I think we all have the ability to intentionally do that for our kids and let them go through pain.
No, that makes sense. And, another thing that really stood out to me when you were speaking at a previous mastermind that we were both at is you said, don't ease up today because you may need the advantage tomorrow. And, that's so truthful in business, in life, in your family relationships. What does that mean to you, and how has that served you as you went through your real estate career and, now getting into these marathons?
Yeah. And I mean, I think so. The idea is like, at times life is going to get hard, right? And so what an average person will do, a mediocre person, like most people, when things get hard, they recess. They ease up, they step back, they take it easy and try to let the pain just go away. And it actually doesn't just occur that way. It actually, it lingers longer until you forge through the pain, right? Or through the hardship. And so that's ultimately what I learned through doing, in these hard races, is I watched it, even at these extreme elite levels, there is levels of mediocrity. And so when things got hard during the races, people started settling down. They eased up. They got in the car. They stopped. They had to start stretching. They had to put blankets on themselves. They had to eat more. They had to do all this thing. And so what our strategy was we were just going to forge through. We weren't going to stop. We weren't going to slow down. And what that did was that gave us a competitive advantage, moments in time that compounded over 3 days to actually be able to come into third place male. But if we didn't do that on day one, thinking that we just had a chance on day 3, that we wouldn't have happened, right? And life is no different. We've been in a situation not too long ago, within the last 14 months, where our company was bleeding $300,000 to $800,000 a month, and it got that bad because I was in that position where I'm just gonna hopefully outweight this. Hopefully, this storm just goes away, right? And I was being very average. I mean, I was letting doing what most people would do. But the moment I made the conscious decision that this is not my fate, I'm going to actually get myself sober. I'm going to clean up. I'm going to focus on fitness. I'm going to forge through this intentionally really fast. I solved my problem. One of my mentors, Ken Clothier, he gave me a goal to put $1 million in the bank. And this is in a situation where I'm bleeding 300 to 800,000 a month. I've never had $1 million in the bank, ever. And he's like, I want you in 3 months to put $1 million in the bank. And I ended up being able to put 3.6 million in the bank. But that was because I didn't ease up. I actually started to go harder. I went harder during the hard times. And that is ultimately what has, forged me through to the position I am in today, right? And not just in financial situation, but relationships and fitness and everything else.
I love that. And I love that you said that it gives you a competitive advantage, because there's so many people out there that don't do that. So if you can, do that one thing differently, you can really separate yourself from the pack. I'd like to rewind a little bit here, Brady, and talk about, the Ultraman and the Ironmans that you've done. What motivated you to start competing in these grueling events? Because obviously Ironman is super tough. And then you're taking a look at an Ultraman, which is even, substantially harder. What motivated you?
Yeah, well, what got me into the fitness aspect of it was ultimately, I did the thing called the 75-day hard back in 2021. And so this, if you don't know what this is, it's 75 days straight. You work out twice a day. One has to be outside, 45-minute workouts, so 2 of them. Drink a gallon of water a day, read 10 pages of personal development book a day, take a photo of yourself. And the last one is not drink alcohol. And so when I was considering doing this, I ran it by my wife, and she's like, there's no way in heck you can actually do that. There's no way in heck you can't drink for 75 days straight. It's impossible. And I agreed with her. I said, and this ultimately was what made the challenge so worthwhile in attempting, because it was hard. That's one thing about goals, guys, is like you cannot, if you're setting yourself mediocre goals that kind of like really don't matter and things that you could probably just do, that's the reason why you give up on them, because they don't matter enough, right? So the goal has to be big enough and have enough why that you're going to actually attack it. And so that's what it was. This goal was to me, and I ended up doing it 75 days, and I changed my body, but more importantly, I changed my mind. And so obviously it was the first time in my life since I was probably 14, 15 years old that I didn't have a drop of alcohol in my system. And everything went up. I became a better father. I became the person I wanted to become, right? And I didn't live with regret, and it was great. But life got back. I ultimately, after probably another 6 or 8 months after that, I fell back in the same habits, and I was hanging around the same people. So what I said to myself, how can I get back to being that person that I was during the 75-day hard? And the connection that I made was fitness. Fitness and having big fitness goals doesn't allow you time to socialize, doesn't allow time, for drinking and all this other stuff, right? That most people still do. You have to focus on fitness, and you have to focus on your health and eating the right things and hydrating. And so when I made that connection, I started training for a half Ironman. So I did that, and it worked. But then the second time after I did a half Ironman, I learned that I could socialize and drink and all this stuff while training for it. So eventually, during that time, I was explaining to you guys where the company was bleeding to death. I was back to socializing and drinking, and I was actually using alcohol to make the fear of the situation go away. I actually was using alcohol to sleep at night, to fall asleep, because it's like I thought I was probably a couple months away from being bankrupt. And there was a lot of fear there. And not only that, I remember I was actually on a vacation. There was an ooh-ah moment where I made the decision not to drink ever again. And it was like we were on the boat in the Exumas on our 53-foot boat. And I just saw how I was reacting and how I was acting and how big of a part of alcohol was in my life. And I saw how I was using it essentially as a drug. And I saw how most people actually use it as a drug, right? To make these feelings either appear, happiness and joy and fun, or make them certain feelings go away, like fear and sadness and anxiety and all these things. And I realized I need to do the hard work. I need to be the one to stop and make it so my kids don't think that this is normal. And I just decided at that moment that I'm not going to drink again. And so when I left there, I went and decided, okay, I'm going to get back into fitness. I'm going to go twice as hard as I ever did. And I did a 50-mile run, trained for 3 months. And it was in the Florida Keys. It was 109 degrees Fahrenheit. and I ended up coming first place male. This is 50 miles. It took 12 hours and 49 minutes or something like that. And it was insane. I ended up in the hospital for 3 days. Long story there with rhabdo and dehydration. It was insane. Like the ambulance drivers were telling me, asking me where I ran. And I thought I was in Canada. I didn't know my kids' names. And so they thought they were doing heart tests and brain tests. And like they did, $49,000 worth of stuff on me. And ultimately they found an issue with my heart. It has a leaky valve, which it's just an anomaly. It was just a coincidental finding. Anyway, immediately after that, I got back on the horse. And I'm like, hey, because I'm on the path. I knew that I was becoming the person I really needed to become, and I would be that way forever. And so from there, we did 29029, which is a Mount Everest simulation climb. And then immediately after that, my coaches say, what's next? And then I decided, okay, I'm going to run a 100-miler and raise $100,000 for children's charities. And so I trained for 3 months for that and did that. And then Ultraman came up. My coach is like, at the end of the 100-miler, I was literally sitting there with my feet up. And he's like, I can't believe I'm going to ask you this question. And he's like, what do you want to do next? And I said, I want to do Ultraman. So that's this 6.2 mile swim, right? Which is 10 kilometers. Then after that, you get into the water, you do 90 miles one day. And then you do the next day is 72 miles, the second day. And the third day is a double marathon. And so my coach is like, okay, well, that's fine. Let's look into that. And so I looked into it, and it turns out I couldn't actually do it because I didn't qualify. You actually had to do a full distance Ironman to qualify for this race. And so he's like, well, I guess we know what we're doing next. And at that point, I was kind of defeated. I'm like, anyway, I guess it is what it is, right? And my wife says, like, Brady, when do you ever take no for an answer? And I said, that's a good question. Maybe I will apply. I'll apply anyway. So I applied. And, 5 or 6 days later, I got a message, and it was from Ultraman. It's like, congratulations, you're accepted. You get to participate in this. It's an invite only thing. And so I sent that to my coach. I sent him a screenshot to my coach, and he's like, that's good and bad. And I'm like, oh, wow. He's like, well, it's good that you got in, really bad that we only have 3 months to make you a cyclist, right? So, 200 to bike this far is insane. You have to do this in 3 months. It's grueling. I mean, we were doing 6 to 9 hour training rides, right? And so we didn't do a lot of training for the run, but what we did, only because my legs had built up durability from the 50 miler and 100 miler, but we spent a lot of time in the water and a lot of time on the bike. And then we did some big simulation training sessions where we actually had to go swim for a couple hours, bike for 9 hours, and then following day run like 32 miles. And it was insane. It was excruciatingly hard. But yeah, that's kind of how we got into it. And in March, I ended up doing Ultraman. And yeah, it was just next level. Like,
that is next level. And I'd love for you to share, some of the setbacks that you had when you were running or when you were doing the Ultraman. I mean, you had issues on your bike, you had issues in the water. Tell us a little bit more about that and how you overcame those setbacks.
Yeah. So the day of Ultraman, the first thing you do is swim the 6.2 miles. And so you do 3 2-mile loops in this lake in a wetsuit, and you have a kayaker beside you. And the kayaker is on your crew. And this is all self-crewed. So I actually had to bring 6 crew members. So we had my mom, my wife, my daughter, and then from our boardroom mastermind, Seema, our buddy Chris, and another buddy Tom, right? And so and Mel, a bike buddy. So the kayaker Chris had to actually kayak beside me and make sure that I stayed straight. That was his job. And 2 miles, the 2 laps. First lap was cruising, 1 hour around. Second lap, not bad. Third lap, unbelievably hard. It's just like you're disoriented and you're hallucinating, sort of like you're swimming and you kind of see the bottom and the bottom's all moving. Anyway, we did it. What was amazing about that swim is going 6.2 miles is that we only went over by 100 yards. We were 6.2 miles plus 100 yards. So our my guide, my buddy Chris, did an amazing job guiding me. So when you get off the bike, get out of the water, you have to get on your bike and you're starting to fuel. And by the way, in the water, you have to drink You had to hydrate as well as eat, right, while you're swimming. So you get on the bike, and I had biked down a hill 0 times. And so and especially I got a new bike 3 weeks before Ultraman, so that was kind of stupid. But yeah, so I haven't biked down a hill because I live in Florida. There is no hills in Florida, right? And so I was on this bike. You can barely, I've never, my shoulders after swimming for so long, like, you're biking up the hill and then you're like going down, and I'm just riding my bike like a scared like kid that just learned how to ride his bike, right? It was crazy. But of course, we didn't go very far. We were probably 17 miles in, had a flat tire, completely horrible experience. I ended up walking for 20 minutes. Our crew was nowhere to be found. We didn't have a cell phone because we thought it was going to rain. We didn't think we would need it. Long story short is I had 3 people pass me while I had that flat. It took close to 40 minutes to get that flat fixed, which it should have been like under 5 minutes, right? So that set us back. But the good news is we had a 10-mile headwind. Okay, so that made things very, very challenging. But then it also torrential rain and downpoured, and went down to 41 degrees Fahrenheit. It might as well have been snowing. So this is really where I started what I told you guys about before. Like, I'm racing against these guys, these men and women that are like actually professional triathletes, like professional Ironmen and women. And that's what they do for a living. Some of these people have done 10, 20 like Ironmans. And when it got really cold, wet, and rainy, and hilly and windy, like everybody started softening up. But our strategy and our plan was to push hard, right? To not stop, to not give in, not to slow down, right? We just wanted to keep moving. That's the goal. That was the strategy. And that's what we did. And one after another, we passed them. We passed all those 3 people that passed me during the flat. We passed another couple more, right? And so that was a great way to end the day. But it was so cold. Like, it took like 10 hours and 40 minutes in this weather. And it was so cold that I couldn't hold on to the handles because you're like shivering so bad like this. It was just crazy. But yeah, that was day 1. Day 2 was, just a really long bike ride. It was, great weather. It got really hard at the end. We did have a flat tire, but the flat tire at the start, it was only like 5-minute change. So we had 2 or 3 people pass me at that point, and it got hard at the end. The last 30 miles, there was one hill that was 8 miles long, right? And so again, when things get hard, what did we see happen? People started easing up. They started getting, they started slowing down. They started taking breaks. They started like doing all these things. And we just stuck to our strategy, which was to push harder when it got hard, to not stop, to not slow down, to bear, just to endure and go through it. And that again proved to work. And so our strategy for day 3 was, we knew that if we beat these 2 or 3 people, that I could finish 3rd place male, and I would finish top 6, which would give me position at Worlds. And so that was the goal. But at the start of the day, we were going into this at I think position 9. I think we were 9 or 8th or 9th. So we had some work to do. And this was the run. So 52-mile run, double marathon, and there was like 5,000 or 6,000 feet of elevation. Actually before that, the night before, day 2 and day 3, I was like breathing really weird. And I said to Chris, I'm like, can you like hear that? And I'm like, and you could like hear gargling in my breath. It sounded like you had pneumonia, right? Probably people have heard that, where it's like you could hear the phlegm in there. And we, Chris, who my buddy was one of my crew guys, he said, yeah, dude, you have SIPE, which is swimmer-induced pulmonary edema. And it's deadly. It's a good thing I didn't Google that between day 2 and day 3. But yeah, so when I started running on day 3, like I didn't feel great. Obviously, I've been, destroying my body for like, it's been now like basically 2 11-hour days. And now we're going into day 3, expecting another, 10 and a half, 11-hour day. And so, I got into it. My heart rate was certainly elevated for a little bit. I just thought, it's going to settle down. And we got into about mile 12, and I'm running up to this dude, and he's bent over, kind of like he's like holding on to his legs. And, we're only a half marathon in. And I'm like, dude, are you all right? Like, do you want me to, get a roller or something out of my crew vehicle? He's like, no. He's like, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. So I said, okay, I'm going to get help. So I ran on, and he had crew with him. So I ran on, and I got to Chris, our Navy SEAL guy. And we had a blood oxygen tester, right? So I said, Chris, go back there, test that guy. This is what's going on. Chris knew what to do. He goes and tests them. The guy was at 70% blood oxygen level. So they ended up calling 911. And so as I'm running, I'm starting, like, now I'm only like 13 miles, and I'm like, my heart rate's going higher, right? And I'm like, damn, and then I see the police car go by with the ambulances on, or the flashers on, right? And I'm still running, and my heart rate's going to 160, 170. And now I'm starting to run walk, which was always part of the strategy, but not till like, halfway through this marathon in maybe, right? But I had to run walk because my heart rate was getting so high. And when I walked, it wouldn't really come down. And then I see the ambulance go by, and I'm like, oh gosh, what's going on here? And so my heart rate was going to 180, right? And I couldn't get it really lower below 165. And I thought, damn, am I next? Right? And I was starting to get like disoriented. And so my crew swapped crews. SEMA came in with me, and just to give me some female energy and maybe try to like talk me through this. And like they were trying to feed me, and I really wasn't into eating the things that they wanted me to eat, like sandwiches and stuff. It just wouldn't go down. And eventually I was just like, I had to succumb. This was going on for like 20 minutes, half hour. I was getting disoriented and dizzy. And eventually Chris came back and he tested my blood oxygen level. And I remember me testing all my fingers. He's like, he tested the other hand. I'm like, oh, this isn't going to be good. And he's like, dude, I need to go get something for sugar. You need to get this into you. We're going to finish this. You're going to be fine. I'm like, what was my oxygen? He's like, you're at 70%. So the thing that sent the other guy to the hospital is the same thing that my friends in my crew are saying, no, you're going to make this. You're going to survive. You're like, you're not, they never said survive. You're going to make this. You're going to finish this. Right. And at this point, like, I'm like, am I going to, I had these thoughts, right? I never said anything out loud. Right. I never said to them, I wasn't going to finish. I don't know if I can make it. I'd never say that out loud, but all the thoughts were certainly going through my voice. I know that what I say out loud gives those voices power. Right. So super intentional about any time is not giving the voices inside your head power, because and almost to the opposite is like, hey, even if you don't believe it, give it like, hey, I know I'm going to finish this, even though if you don't believe it, because that gives belief. And so, what they did was they rushed back to me and they gave me a whole bunch of freezies, gave me a whole bunch of sugar, jammed the glucose, a bunch of gels, and a bunch of glucose, and it brought my blood sugar back up. And as that happened, I became clear again. Like, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm like a different person. My heart rate came down, and we kind of sorted that. It took about an hour, but I was running, and I was back. It was scary because I had already been in the hospital once before. Right. And I'm like, damn, I do not want to do that again. And I don't obviously want to die. But, it just shows the importance of having the right people around you, because they could have easily just as well said, Brady, whoa, we need to stop here. We need to get you to the hospital. They could have easily given me an out. I could have taken that. Right. And especially in that low point, I would take that. And that's what we can, as people, as friends and people in our community, like I could give Michael you an out when you're having a weak moment, or I could not give you the out. I can support you and make you do the hard thing and get through it. And you'll feel amazing about yourself when you do.
That's amazing. Yeah, no, a couple really important things that you said, over the last 5 minutes. First, keep in mind that you need to push harder. If you're going soft, your competition is going to be pushing. And if you can push harder than you think, it's going to set yourself aside from the pack. And then also, how critically important your team is. And I would assume, Brady, that's the case, whether it be a physical challenge like you did with Ultraman, or in business or family, whatever avenue of life. I would assume it's really critical to have the right team surrounding you, correct?
Oh, dude, 100%. Yeah. Like, when stuff gets hard in business now, I've got a coach. I know I could call Kent or, Casey or any of these guys that I know, men or women, right? And be like, hey, this is what's happening. And they'll be like, hey, bro, just do this. You got this. Let's go. Like, get rid of that little voice inside your head. These are the options you've got. Just get it done.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love that. And another thing that stood out that you said, recently when we were chatting or maybe we were speaking, is you asked, when was the last time you did something really hard, and that you should be asking yourself that. And that really hit home to me. I had to actually think about it on the physical side. It's like, gosh, when was the last time that I did something really out of my comfort zone on the physical level? How often would you recommend asking that question to yourself in business, for your physical health, in your family life?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody should not only ask the question. I think you should put something very, very hard every single year. I think there should be something so hard on your calendar that you're scared that you'll fail every single year, right? And because you will be, especially if you surround yourself with the right people, possibly get a coach, and create a plan and get super consistent and have a strategy, you'll get after it. And whether you fail or not, I mean, failure is just, you probably won't. I mean, it's just a level of success. So yeah, and you're forced to grow, right? And so, especially us as adults, like the hardest thing, oftentimes as adults, the hardest things that we ever did was when we were in high school or in college, or shortly after that, right? And because then we get into work life and we get into socializing and having kids, and then it's just like let's kind of cruise. We're on cruise control, but it's because, I found that I really had to re-identify as a new person, right? And because the person that I believed who I was like the older Brady, like the one that from, when I was 16, 17 to 25, right? And I had that vision of myself stuck there. But really, like, we have the ability to do some magnificent things and become athletes as adults, every single one of us. And I think we have to believe we're athletes. We have to believe that. Because if you believe you are an athlete, if you believe that you can do hard things, then you can, right? And then you start training like an athlete. Even though we're a dad, even though we're a mom, even though we're a business person, an entrepreneur, or whatever you do for work, you can still believe that you're an athlete and treat your body like one, right? Because when you start treating your body like one, then your mind gets to the place that you can operate at your best as a parent, as a mom, as the CEO or whatever your career is, right? But it does start with the body, and we've got to do stuff hard, right? It's just, you don't get better unless you do hard things.
I agree. And I even think about, just working out during the week. If you miss a day working out, you set yourself up for a different type of day than when you have a really solid workout in the morning. And, if you can do really hard things, like you're saying, once a year or once a quarter, I mean, that's going to set yourself apart from the pack that much further. Brady, I'd love to shift over to real estate a little bit before we wrap up the show. Obviously, you've been very successful in real estate investing. Can you share a little bit about what you've been up to recently and what's been working for you?
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, so we built a big multifamily portfolio in Canada, like duplexes, triplexes, 10-unit buildings, that kind of stuff. And then when we came to the US, we bought a whole bunch of single-family homes. We were going to flip a bunch of them right at the peak of the market. And that kind of sucked. But what we did do was we put together a team to develop self-storage facilities. And so in that, financing for development, for commercial development, got extremely challenging, and it still is today. And so we thought we got really good at just finding sites, actually. So we thought, okay, instead of going through the whole development pipeline, the whole development phase, all the things associated with development, which is obviously finding site, raising the equity, getting the debt, building the thing, project managing the thing, and then doing the lease up and operations of the thing. Why don't we just get really good at finding the sites? Because finding sites, great locations for developers, is their hardest, is their biggest challenge. And why don't we just solve that? Because that's actually the thing that we're great at. So we just really niched down on that, and we started Barefoot Land Co. We transacted. We did a few sites where we entitled them as for self-storage sites and sold them to self-storage developers. And then we started Barefoot Land Co. that focuses purely on that. And so, what we've done well in this company over all the rest of them was really hired based on our core value. So, up until now, we always seemed to hire based on what was easy. Who did we know, right? And didn't have a real strategy for hiring people. And now, because my core values are so firm and my standards are so much higher for myself personally, then it was a lot easier for me to hold everybody around me to the same standards as well, including hiring. So we hire, and obviously win during work and fire based on our core values, which are we do the work, we go above and beyond, we do what we said we're going to do, and we don't make excuses. And so in this company, I've got the best team. Right now we've got about 15 people working for us, and we've got a great leadership team. And so that's ultimately what we do is we find these sites off market. and that they're primed for self-storage. So they have extremely high rental rates. They have demand in that market, meaning that they're not oversupplied. And then we'll do geotech, environmentals, feasibility studies, survey, site plans, and we'll tee it up for a developer and then add a fee to that, to the cost of the land. So if we get it under contract for $1 million, we may add a $500 to $1 million fee on top of that, and then sell it essentially. You're basically flipping the paperwork is what we're doing. Yeah, that's what we're doing in real estate, and that's what's working for us. And the more specific we get, right, and more niche, the better we are getting. Ultimately,
that makes sense, and I love that you took a step back. You were successful to some extent when you were fully developing the properties, but you took a step back and you're like, "Gosh, what are we really good at? What's our niche?" And you understood that and you figured it out. So I'd recommend to anyone listening to this, regardless of where you are with your career or your business, take a step back and fully understand, where you're really, really good at what you're doing. And I love that you said you're hiring on your core values. That is huge. That's something that we've implemented as well. And for anyone out there listening, if you don't have core values put into place with your business, with your career, with your family, do it right now. Put it into place and then communicate it often with your team or with your family. The more you can communicate that, the stronger you're going to become as a team, and the quicker you're going to be able to identify people that don't fall within your core values as well, and get those people out of your life. Brady, obviously you went through some challenges. I'd love to hear, a specific challenging deal or project that you worked on and really how you overcame that challenge in real estate.
One of the biggest challenges, one of the biggest challenges we had when we were developing a bunch of multifamily in Canada, and the interest rates. So we were just finishing about $15 million worth of development. Most of it was self-funded. We had debt on it, like we had construction debt, but we were funding the equity. And the interest rates in Canada, this is all in Canada. So the interest rates went from like 1% to 7.5%. And so in that, plus the development itself took another 6 to 8 months longer than it should have because of delays. It was like COVID delays. This is a long kind of like excuse, but there was supply issues for windows and certain things, and just contractors taking too long. And also the municipality drags you through the mud in Ontario. It's kind of like New York or California. So, this project took longer than anticipated, which then made us have to renegotiate the debt during it. And when they renegotiated the debt, they reappraised the value of the property, and the value of the property was essentially going down as the interest rates were going up. So the new debt that they put on was like 10% less than we had budgeted for. So when I was talking to you about the $300,000 to $800,000 cash suck, this was all happening at the same time. And so these projects have to get finished, right? And then because they can't get sold until they're done. So we had this going on, and it's just like trying to sell these things, as the interest rates are coming up and the values are literally going down. Like our market went down 30% in 6 months. And so what we did was, again, thankfully we got good advice from Ken, and then I stopped drinking. I got my head out of the sand, and I'm just like, hey, we need to sell things, and we sell things fast. And so that was the biggest thing, was when we started seeing that the market, we didn't do this all the time, but we were chasing the market down when we were trying to sell things. So if we thought it was worth 500, we would list it for 515, as you normally would. But on a market that's going down, you actually need to list it at 485, right? You need to get below the market. And so when you do chase it, so eventually the market will hit you and you'll sell them fast. And that's what we did. We ended up getting out of them pretty quick and didn't make money. That was actually one of the first deals we'd ever lost on. And probably, one of there's 2 deals out of the hundreds that we've lost on. But that one, we both and I had investors on that. We lost 30 grand each, on a project that we should have profited $1 million. And so, thankfully, I think the thing that got us out of it with the limited damage was just being able to just move fast, sell them fast, get below the market. When it's declining, you gotta price it very aggressively. And, it just shows the importance of setting up debt before you do development projects, right? I think that's the biggest thing, is setting up proper debt before, and locking in those terms, giving yourself longer than, if you think it's going to be an 18-month project, give yourself 2 years or more, right? For delays, so you don't have to renegotiate. There was all kinds of lessons in that project, but that'd be, probably one that hurt me the most.
Got it. And we've learned that lesson as well. Give yourself longer than expected. If you have a 3-year project, give yourself a little bit more length on your debt terms than what you think you're going to use. And that's what there's a lot of issues in the market right now, because you have short-term debt and the interest rates have ramped up, and you just don't have enough time to ride through real estate market recovering. So appreciate you sharing that. Any other advice before we wrap up here, Brady, in regards to business or mindset for our listeners out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think you just need to, I think the biggest piece of advice is to know that everybody's watching. I mean, not everybody's watching, but the people that matter are watching you. So, how you act, how you treat yourself, how you treat yourself matters is probably the one that I should really like set home, is that, the way you treat yourself, the way you treat your body is the way that everybody else is going to treat theirs. What you do as a leader, everybody listening, gives everybody around you permission to do the same, right? So that's your kids, your wife, your coworkers, your employees, everybody, right? So, but it all starts with our body. And so the hardest decision people can make is to go work out, right? Is to look after the body, is to not drink at that party. It's to not eat the food, right? It's the hardest decision. But when somebody is around, these people that are making the good decisions, the hard decisions, that makes those hard decisions so much easier for everybody else, right? And I think that's the biggest piece of advice, is if you truly want to be a leader, you need to look after number one first, and that's yourself. And, I always give this analogy of women. Like, we all know, like, everybody has a mother, and who does mom look after first? Everybody else. Grandma's the same way, right? And they serve everybody else. But what if mom had the time to work out an hour every single day? What if grandma looked after her body every single day? What if, we gave them the opportunity, the time? How much sharper, better would their mindset be, and how much better would they be able to serve everybody? But that's what happens. That this is true for men and women, right? But we need to look after number one first. We need to be selfish, right? Because we can only then serve, everybody we want to better.
I absolutely love that. And I think, you can do it with eating, working out, reading, drinking alcohol, like you said, using patience, being on time to meetings. There's so many things throughout life that you can work on, and that you can set yourself, apart from the pack. And, it's really going to help lead others, whether it be in your business, in your career, or in your family life. So I appreciate you sharing that, Brady. And before we wrap up, I'd love, for you to give a book recommendation or a podcast recommendation, or something that's made a positive impact on you throughout your life.
Sure. Yeah, I would say the book that I'd loved the most recently is called 10X is Easier Than 2X. And so what it's about essentially is, if you want to double your income or really change your life, if let's say you want to double your income, right? Most of us will think, okay, I just need to do more of A, B, C, and D, right? More of the stuff, right? Which essentially is going to give us less time of all the things that we want to do. Sure, we could double our income, but what if we said, how are you going to 10X your income? Well, then you have to re-strategize everything. You actually have to look at things differently. You have to have different conversations. You have to, have different people around you. You actually have to completely change the way you think about things. And when you get that wrapped around, you understand this theory, you start to really understand how to do some huge things in life, right? And it commonly becomes different version of who you are, right? You need to become the person who will be able to accomplish the things that you desire to accomplish, because we are not that person today, right? And that 10X is easier than 2X is just with such a powerful message that, I think it could really hit home for everybody.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, Brady. I really appreciate it. If our listeners want to reach out and get a hold of you or learn more about you, how can they do that?
Yeah, Instagram, Facebook, social media. So they can go to brady.mcdonald84, or they can go to 0to100.com, and we've got all this gear and 100-day challenge, fitness challenge, which is really great. People are losing 25, 30 pounds during the 100 days and changing their life. People are quitting their jobs and starting businesses. It's unbelievable, because they're having the same clarity I had when I did the 75-day hard, right? But this is way better than that challenge. So anyway, we've got all kinds of cool stuff on there too, so they can check that out.
Awesome. Well, make sure to check that out, 0to100.com. And thanks everyone for joining us on the show today. Really appreciate it. We hope you found it both informative and entertaining. And if you did enjoy the episode, make sure to leave us a rating and review because it helps us bring on incredible guests like Brady. So Brady, thanks again for coming on.
All right. Thanks a lot, Michael. Appreciate you.